The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
Good morning to you here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen alongside Alex Fisher. So some kids are already waking up, heading back to the classroom this morning. A couple more are getting a few more hours in of sleep before summer is officially over.
This morning, 2 people are seriously wounded after a shooting at a motel in South Bakersfield. Police say it happened on Colony Street near Panama Lane, outside a room at the Vagabond Inn just before 7:30 last night. Officers say 2 people were wounded in the shooting and taken to the hospital. Police say a man in his 20s ran away from the scene, and about 30 minutes later, officers found the suspected shooter about a mile away and took him into custody.
The Kern County Sheriff's Office is warning residents of thieves posing as deputies. KCSO posted on their Facebook page reporting multiple armed robberies over the weekend in Taft, saying thieves were wearing tan uniforms with a gold badge. The Sheriff's Office says deputies will never ask for money when you contact them, and to be on the lookout for impersonators. Officials say if you believe you have been contacted or pulled over by someone who's not a law enforcement officer, call 911.
Bakersfield police officer Brandon Thibault originally said he did not recall finding marijuana during a home search in November, but now admits to flushing the marijuana down the toilet. The search was for a gun reportedly brandished at an undercover cop. Thibault said he was mad when he heard about what happened and flushed the legally owned marijuana down the toilet. Thibault is charged with a misdemeanor petty theft and has a court hearing in about 2 weeks.
In your 17 homicide watch this morning, a Bakersfield man is under arrest after a deadly shooting in Central Bakersfield. Officers were called to First Street near Oleander Avenue just before 7 Friday night. When they arrived, they found a woman on the ground suffering from a gunshot wound. She died at the scene. Yesterday, police arrested the suspected shooter, identified as 54-year-old Glenn Jones. It happened on Emerald Isle Way, just south of the West Side Parkway in Southwest Bakersfield. Jones was booked into the Kern County Jail facing murder charges, due in court tomorrow. The woman's identity has not been released, and it's unclear what led to the deadly shooting.
And a man accused of killing a 68-year-old woman 2 years ago is scheduled for arraignment today. Police confirmed the arrest of 46-year-old James Lee Glass, who was taken into custody last week in Central Bakersfield. Glass is charged with first-degree murder in the 2020 death of Henrietta Snowden.
5:05 is your time now, and in your 17 Health Watch. The World Health Organization announced it will hold an open forum to rename monkeypox following concerns raised by critics. Critics raised those concerns that the name could be derogatory or have racist connotations. The health agency said the decision was made following a meeting of scientists last week, adding it is in line with current best practices for naming diseases. The UN Health Agency released a statement Friday saying it's also renamed 2 families of the virus using Roman numerals instead of geographic areas to avoid stigmatization. Welcome back this morning in education news. The Bakersfield Police Department is reminding the public about driving safe with school buses soon returning to the roads. BPD says drivers should obey all speed limits, especially in school zones. Avoid unnecessary distractions when operating a vehicle, especially when kids may be present. Stop when a school bus has its stop sign extended or when the driver exits the bus to escort students across the street. And be extra cautious when you're driving in your neighborhood before, during, and after school hours.
We should also note here that because a lot of schools are starting later, it could be even more busy on your morning commute. I know that there's typically a lot of schools were starting before parents were going to work. So just keep that in mind that you might see more buses on the road during your morning commute. So slow down, make sure you keep our kids safe. And as schools reopen, the Valley Air District is asking parents to turn off their cars while waiting to pick up students at the end of the school day. Officials say turning the car off helps reduce air pollution and student exposure to emissions, as increased school traffic contributes to the formation of ground-level ozone. You can also reduce emissions by carpooling with neighbors or friends, taking the school bus, or walking kids to school when the air quality allows.
Doctors are warning heavy backpacks for students could potentially lead to health problems. Doctors say it's important for families to make sure they are not sending their kids to school with overweight backpacks. They say heavy backpacks can change the natural curve of the spine, affecting a kid's ability to maintain posture. They also say it can even cause an extended cervical spine. Doctors recommend families pick a lightweight bag with a padded back on it, several compartments, and wide padded shoulder straps.
I was that kid that I'd never like to go to my locker because it was extra time and it was on a different part of campus. So I always had a full backpack. I do not recommend that
definitely
at
not.
all. It's not comfortable. Well, with most schools returning this week, COVID-19 is still a concern for kids returning to the classroom. But Kern County schools are preparing with a more optimistic mindset. 17's Chris Burton has the story.
Well, public health models paint an encouraging picture of the fall. Officials expect a school year with less disruption, if not less illness, than in years past.
COVID is continually a concern, but we are in a far different place than we were almost 2.5 years ago.
With kids returning to campus this week, educators and public health officials hope the shadow of COVID doesn't fall quite as heavily on this school year. Public Health Department modeling predicts a decline in cases over the next few weeks, although officials admit back-to-school spread could affect those numbers. Most districts will continue to follow California Department of Public Health guidelines recommending students who test positive for COVID stay home for 5 days or until symptoms have cleared.
We are still, if we do test positive for COVID, we are staying home. But in going by the old guidelines, like until you have tested negative, you need to stay home.
This year, consistent with the end of last school year, masking and other distancing measures have moved from requirements to recommendations. The COVID vaccine won't be required for California students until the start of next school year. And officials say with looser guidelines, parents have greater responsibility to pay attention to their child's health and hold them out if necessary.
If our children are not feeling well, that we need to keep them home. We need to see what's going on with them. COVID is not the only thing.
In fact, says Hernandez, as COVID has stolen the spotlight, education about other childhood diseases like measles and the flu has dipped. With any disease, keeping children home and out of the classroom is essential to managing an outbreak.
It's just one of the things in any setting with a lot of people together that all you need is one person to introduce it to the group.
Health officials continue to emphasize proper hand washing and hygiene techniques, along with vaccination, as effective preventative measures against any illness. Chris Burton, 17 News.
And Dr. Namisha Amin will be joining us this morning in about an hour to talk a little bit more about parents' concerns for their kids' health as we head back to school. And Kern Public Health is hosting a series of back-to-school vaccination clinics at the fairgrounds. The next clinic is today, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Families are encouraged to make an appointment, though. You can call 321-3000 to do so.
To Washington now, and the fast-developing story that has captured the nation's attention. The search of former President Trump's Florida home and top-secret documents FBI agents found there. NBC's Susan McGinnis has more.
1 week after FBI agents searched former President Trump's Florida home, a warning from the FBI and Homeland Security for agents to be extra vigilant. A joint bulletin also saying their families could be at risk. Secret Service hardening security at locations including the White House. That following last week's attempted breach of the FBI Cincinnati office and a spike in anti-FBI rhetoric online and on Capitol Hill.
The FBI raid of President Trump is a complete abuse and overreach of its authority.
The Republican Party used to stand with law enforcement, and I hope some of them do today, because this kind of rhetoric is very dangerous to our country.
The Senate Intelligence Committee now asking for a national security damage assessment and for the Justice Department to provide the documents seized.
It's very important long term for the Justice Department, now that they've done this, that they show that this was not just a fishing expedition.
The former president, who this weekend pointed to great simmering anger in the country, claims the material was declassified.
It would have to be documented what they were, each document, so that people would know what had been declassified.
Months earlier, Trump's attorney signed a statement asserting all classified material was returned.
If the Trump people represented that they provided all the classified or national security information and didn't, that's a serious problem.
Still unknown potential legal jeopardy for the first president in U.S. history to have his home searched by federal agents. Former President Trump also said this weekend that agents seized documents subject to attorney-client privilege and executive privilege, and he wants them back. In Washington, Susan McGinnis, NBC News.
Meantime, a man died by suicide after crashing his car into a barricade and firing shots in Washington, D.C. yesterday. The wreck happened roughly 300 feet from the U.S. Supreme Court. After the man crashed, the car caught fire. Capitol Police say the man, identified as 29-year-old Richard Aaron York, got out of his vehicle and fired several shots into the air. As Capitol Police approached, York reportedly turned the gun on himself.
We are on a higher alert. We have put some enhanced security operations in effect so that we can not only try and hopefully deter and prevent something like this from happening, but certainly respond very quickly to mitigate it if we have to.
Officials said the motivation behind the incident is unknown at this time, but it does not appear it was targeted members of Congress.
Making news around the world, today marks 1 year since the Taliban took over Kabul. On August 15, 2021, the Taliban moved through Afghanistan's capital following the country's government's collapse. Ashraf Ghani, the embattled Afghan president, joined fellow citizens and foreigners who fled. Hundreds of Kabul residents rushed to the new Kabul bank to withdraw their life savings before fleeing. Americans were evacuated by helicopter from the U.S. Embassy. At least 800 Americans have been evacuated from the country since the takeover.
A group of 5 U.S. lawmakers landed in Taiwan yesterday, prompting another round of military drills from China. Democratic Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts led the delegation that arrived just 12 days after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi enraged China with her own trip to the self-governing island. The trip was not announced beforehand. Today, as the lawmakers met with Taiwan's president to discuss region security, trade and investments, China announced more military drills will be taking place around the democratic island. The Chinese government objects to Taiwan having any official contact with foreign governments.
And now in your 17 Court Watch, the trial in Vanessa Bryant's lawsuit against LA County resumes today. She's suing the county over claims that deputies inappropriately shared photos of the 2020 helicopter crash that killed 9 people, including Kobe Bryant and their daughter Gianna. Vanessa Bryant claims sharing of those photos caused her severe emotional distress. Chris Chester, whose wife and daughter were also among the victims, is also part of the lawsuit, expected to last through the week. 52 witnesses are expected to testify, including LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva.
R&B singer R. Kelly also heads back to court today, now facing federal charges. The Grammy-winning artist is expected in a Chicago court for jury selection. The 55-year-old is now being charged federally on child pornography and obstruction of justice charges. It all comes 6 weeks after he was sentenced to 30 years in prison in New York on racketeering and sex trafficking charges. Kelly also faces various state charges in Illinois and Minnesota.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.